All right. Hello. Welcome to my session. There's only me surviving with an enrollment office of one for the NCEA annual convention. This is going to be kind of the structure of this webinar. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my background. I wish we were in person so that I could actually hear from you about you and your role. We're going to talk about the difference between admissions and enrollment. I'm going to give you some really practical tips, some resources, and then I'm going to remind you to have a life. So my name is Courtney Haindell. I am the product manager for FACS SIS, application and enrollment and school site. So I know we have a ton of NCEA schools that use some version of our products, whether tuition payment plans, grant and aid, the student information system. We've had a really close partnership with NCEA and been a sponsor for a long, long time. And so I have been privileged to do some webinars in the past for NCEA. And I just think so highly of all the NCEA folks and especially the resources that they provide for our schools. What's a product manager? That's a great question. So I actually manage the roadmap. So I work on our product development team and I manage the future roadmap. What are we building next? What features are we adding? And it's really fun. I get to work with the sales team and operations and the developers and kind of the whole gamut. So it's been great. I've been at FACS for about 3 years, but before coming to FACS, I worked in education for 20 years. So I started my career teaching middle school English at a Catholic school here in Louisiana where I live. And then I moved into high school, moved into administration as an assistant principal. And then I brought FACS SIS to my school in 2010. Those of you that are administrators, you will appreciate this. I brought FACS SIS to my school in the middle of the year and we implemented it and started using it in January. The previous SIS that we were using actually went out of business, so we had to choose something. So I was that lucky duck that got to tell my teachers that they were coming back a week early from Christmas break to learn this new student information system. And it really should have been kind of a disaster, but it really wasn't. And that really began my, long time love affair with FACS. I was so thankful to FACS for helping us out, and it's just been a great product. And so when an opportunity came to move over to the FACS side, I took it. But my sort of most recent claim to fame is that I was the director of marketing and enrollment at 2 of our largest FACS schools here in Louisiana. So actually the largest private school in Louisiana, and then another one. But I tell you all that background because even when you work at a large school, you don't always have an enrollment office of more than one. This is a picture of my family. So my husband, Ben, is a middle school principal at one of our FACS schools, and we've got 3 daughters, Mary Evelyn, Molly, and Campbell. And my daughters would yell at me if I did not include Honey and Zoe, who began their lives as pandemic puppies back in April of 2020. We have never had pets before, and we lost our minds last April and got these 2 precious little puppies. And then of course now they're huge and lap dogs, and they are my little companions while I'm working from home. So that's a little bit about me, but now I want to give you kind of my background just and how I coped with having an enrollment staff of 1. So when I began my career in administration, and again, this was back in the olden days, like 2005, when marketing was not really a thing. I mean, the most sophisticated thing we did back then was ads in the yellow pages and banner billboards on the highway. If you have been around long enough, you remember how stinking expensive ads in the yellow pages were, but that was kind of the extent of it. And so I was a high school assistant principal by day, a director of marketing by night. And then even admissions back then was it was just totally different than it is now. People would actually call the school. It was a lot of back and forth, and we could handle admissions, like the administrators could handle admissions. So having a staff of 1, and really, I guess, half of 1, because I had 2 full-time jobs, it was not that big of a deal back then. And then, of course, the internet exploded, right? And all of a sudden, we had all these families that wanted to come in and do electronic applications. And then you had to worry about social media. And it feels like, when I look back on it, it feels like it kind of exploded overnight. I actually moved from this school to another school. This was the one that I said was the largest school in Louisiana. And I thought I had hit the big time because I had one job. So my title was Director of Marketing and Enrollment, and I actually had a staff of 4 underneath me, or a staff of 3 underneath me, so 4 including me. I had an admissions coordinator working on nothing but admissions for new students. I had a media coordinator who did all of the social media and all the ads and all that type of thing. And then I had a constituent relations coordinator that did all my events and worked with my PTA. And then I actually was able to hire an advancement coordinator who dealt with all of the development and fundraising. So this was like this era, which would have been 14, I guess, to 16. This was like the greatest time, right? Because I had all this help. My staff were all rock stars. And then my husband and I actually got the chance to go back to school number 1. He was a graduate of that school, and it was just a good opportunity to kind of come back home. And so I was back to a very small staff of 2. I had one part-time director of alumni, and then she left to go stay home with her kids. So then I was just right back to a staff of 1. Now, why am I telling you all this? To tell you that no matter how big your staff is, whether it's literally just you or whether you're lucky and you have a staff of 5 like me, for those glory years, everything still has to get done. So it doesn't matter whether it's just you or a staff of 5, the same amount of work exists, right? And so I learned a lot of just tips and tricks on how to keep up with things and how to make sure that I was able to keep a consistent enrollment management plan and marketing plan, regardless of if I had 1 or 5. Now, I really wish we were in person, because at this time I would say, now tell me a little bit about you. And I would probably do a poll or a little something, if we were in person, and say, raise your hand. But when I've done this presentation in person in the past, when I ask you who's in the room, it's always fascinating to me how many different roles. Some of you are called enrollment managers. Some of them you are admissions. Some of you are marketing, but you do admissions, communications, financial aid. A lot of principals are in charge of this themselves. They have to run a school and also run the admissions department. Many of you have these responsibilities under your umbrella: alumni relations, development, constituent relations. I mean, it's just so fascinating to me how many different variations there are across the country. And then it's also fascinating to me how many people have 1 staff, 2 staff, 3 staff. I will be honest with you and tell you that the number of times that I've done this in person, almost never does anybody raise their hand and say, oh, I have 5 people. Probably because if they have 5 people on staff, they're not coming to a webinar or a conference that's enrollment office of 1. But one thing that I think is fascinating, so the Association of Independent School Admission Professionals, ASAP, which if you do not know about ASAP, or if you're not a member of ASAP, this is my little plug for them. I've been a member of ASAP since I got into the admissions world, and they are one of the 2 professional organizations for our profession. So ASAP and then EMA, the Enrollment Management Association, which I think very highly of as well. The reason I mention ASAP is they actually have put together a couple of years ago a certification program for our profession. So you can go through their professional development arm and get an actual certification, CAEP, Certified Admissions and Enrollment Professional. I did it a couple of years ago. It is excellent professional development. And if you think about every other profession in the world has CEUs and certifications that you can earn. So I really appreciate that ASAP has put that in place for admissions folks in the K-12 space. But anyway, ASAP does a survey of its members every year. And it's always so fascinating for me to look at the results, because they ask their people, what is your title? And this past year, there were 25 different titles that admissions professionals have. And it was every variation from admissions director to assistant to associate officer, enrollment, the whole gamut. But my favorite one, there was a school out in California, I think it was a Montessori school, and their enrollment person, her title was Chief Experience Officer, which kind of makes me laugh when I hear about it, because can you imagine putting that on a business card? But I actually really like that, even though it's a little woo-woo. I like it because it really encompasses what our job has become, right? And that kind of brings me into, are we admissions folks? Or are we enrollment folks? And I am of the mindset that if you have someone at your school that is dedicated to bringing new kids in and keeping the kids you have, that is what's called enrollment management. So I know it seems silly, like, why does it matter to just change the name or change the word? But I want to kind of dive in a little bit just about how important I think it is for everybody at the school to understand that admissions is not like it was in the olden days. Enrollment management is much more all encompassing, and it requires a lot more work. And I think that if you can get people to kind of come on board to the enrollment management train as opposed to admissions, then that will help you down the road when you plead your case for additional staff. All right, so here's another pro tip. I love Brendan Schneider. So, excuse me, if you don't know about Brendan Schneider, he is the Director of Advancement at Swickley Academy in Pittsburgh, and he's fantastic at his job. But several years back, he also started kind of a side gig called Schneider B, and it's basically marketing and enrollment resources for K-12 schools. He also recently started a professional organization called the Marcom Society, so Marketing and Communication Society. And I know that this is an enrollment session, but enrollment and marketing are so closely tied. And my guess is if you only have a staff of one, you probably are in charge of marketing too. So the two, I kind of talk about the two interchangeably. But the reason I really like him is if you've ever thought about the admissions funnel, right? The admissions funnel, which is your typical like inquiry, application, enrollment, it has an endpoint, right? You want them to inquire and then you want them to enroll. And that's cool. Of course, we all want that. But Brendan kind of turned the whole thing, and he talks about the enrollment rings. And the reason I love this is it's never ending, right? So it's not like there's an endpoint like there is with the traditional admissions funnel. This is a constant. So you want to make them aware of your school and then interested in your school. And of course, you want them to apply and enroll and re-enroll, come back. But you want them to become proud alumni, and then you want them to be evangelists. Like so proud of your school that when they go off and get married and have kids of their own, there's no question in their mind that they're going to send their kids to their alma mater. And I think that that's just important, because if you think about like how admissions has changed over the past, that admissions funnel that has the kind of the endpoint, a lot of people, I noticed this at the end of my career before I moved over to fax, a lot of my families were skipping the inquiry stage altogether, and they were going straight to the application. I think what happens is they start to talk to their friends and they stalk you on social media and they look at your website and they kind of make their decision like, yeah, this is where I want my kids to go. And so you can't really focus on just like the traditional funnel, right? The inquiry, application, enrollment funnel. And so again, why do we care about enrollment versus admissions? So strategic enrollment management, or enrollment management in general, is a higher ed concept, okay? And so higher ed colleges have been doing enrollment for years. They do much more than admissions. And this is kind of the official definition of enrollment management. I'm not going to read it, but I want you to look at where the arrow is pointing. Enrollment management embraces virtually every aspect of a school's function and culture, okay? And so this makes sense when you think about those enrollment rings. You want to recruit kids, but you want to retain them. And those two things are just as important as each other. I think in admissions for a long time, I really focused on the new kids. I focused on bringing in the new kids. And I just figured, you know what, if we have a good school, they'll stay. And there's some truth to that. I mean, they're only going to stay if you have a good school. But nowadays, you can't afford to just be like, oh, we've got good classroom teachers, of course, all my families are going to stay. We have a lot of schools now that actually have a specific retention committee. And it's interesting because I think it used to be, I know it was when I first started in admissions, it used to be that for the most part, most of your families were going to stay, right? Unless there was financial issues or they moved out of state or something like that. For the most part, they were going to stay. It's not like that anymore, right? You've got these new, younger millennial families, and what they want to do is they're going to reevaluate at the end of every year and decide whether you're best for their kid, right? Because they're very pragmatic and they want to make sure their money's going to the right place. And so now your enrollment office of one, you can't just focus on bringing the new kids in on recruitment. Now you've got to focus on keeping all the kids that you have. And whether it's fair or not, that actually falls to your responsibility. Now, we're going to talk about a little bit about how it's a school-wide process. But the components of a collaborative strategic enrollment management plan, like the goal is, and again, I promise I'm going to get into some nuts and bolts in just a little bit, but the goal is for you to literally have a written plan of attack for each of these areas, right? Are you totally clear on your school's mission and vision? And the reason I say that that's real, I mean, obviously that's important, but the reason I say that it's like really, really important is because if you, okay, let me back up. When you get to August 1st, right? School's about to start, you're on August 1st, and you've got space in your 8th grade class, let's say, and someone applies for 8th grade. On August 1st, it's a lot easier for you to be a little fuzzy on your school's mission and vision than it is, or than it was for you in January for Catholic Schools Week when you first opened up re-enrollment, right? You could kind of, you had a rosier view back in January, but when you need to fill those seats, like, it can be pretty easy to sort of take some kids that maybe you would not have necessarily taken back in January. And so the reason I point this out is one of the heads of school that I worked for at one of my schools was absolutely fantastic at this. And he was so supportive of me. And he looked at me and he said, you take mission appropriate kids. If you need to reject kids because they are not mission appropriate, I will back you up every single time. And he did. I mean, he was really wonderful about that. You've got to have clear enrollment goals. You know, you can't just say like, oh, we need 20 kids. Well, do you need 20 kids in 8th grade, or do you need 5 in 5th and 5 in 6th and 5 in 7th? When you are in elementary school, it's a lot more difficult because you can't dump, 40 kids in a classroom. I mean, there's just a lot to it. Do you know who your competitors are? The marketing plan is a whole other thing. Do you have not just a recruitment plan for new kids, but also for returning students? So now that I have completely overwhelmed you, right, with this, you need to have this incredible collaborative strategic enrollment plan. When are you supposed to create that system? Okay, like when do you ever have an uninterrupted time to think about this? And that is a great question, because guess what? It's only you, right? This is an enrollment office of one. So you're going to kill me for saying this, but I'm just going to give you my experience. My best work on thinking strategically about stuff like this happened during the summer. And I know that sounds horrifying because we're about to hit the summer, and you probably, especially after 2 COVID years or a year and a half of COVID, you're probably really ready to like not think about school. But for me, and again, this is just my experience, for me, the summer was likely to have a little less traffic coming in and out of my office. We had abbreviated hours, so the office was technically only open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but like I could get a lot of stuff done on Monday and Friday. And the reason that I tell you this is when you don't have any help, when it's just you in the office, anything that you can do during the summer or before the students and teachers come back, that's going to be better for you in the long run. It requires a little bit of discipline, but it's going to be better for you in the long run, because once those kids come back at the beginning of the school year, like it doesn't slow down after that. All right, so let me give you some real concrete tips here, now that I've taken your entire summer away. So some time and sanity savers that I learned the hard way, but that were non-negotiables for me. Number one, this is just kind of a bigger principle, is automate everything. Automate absolutely anything that you can automate, okay? So we're going to talk about how to automate your applications, your registrations, or your enrollments, your funnel emails. And when I say funnel emails, I just mean you've got to have a plan for reaching out to your prospective parents, right? So anybody who inquires, whether they inquire on your website, whether they walk in, whether they call, you can't just talk to them one time and leave them hanging, right? I think maybe you could have done that in the past, but nowadays a lot of families are looking at a bunch of different schools, right? They're shopping around. They're looking at a bunch of different schools to see where is the best fit. And if you're the only school that is not putting your name in front of them via email, then you may just get like left out of the mix, right? My guess is that even if you're the enrollment director, you probably are involved with social media, or you work with someone who's involved, or you're totally involved with social, you're in charge of social media. All that needs to be automated. When it's just you in the office, that means that you are not only processing all the applications, but you're doing all the tours. You are planning all the open houses. All of that stuff needs to be automated as much as possible. Okay, so let's start with online applications. I'm going to give you a little bit of tough love here. I would say in the year 2021, don't even think about paper applications. Okay. Now, the next question that I always get is, we have families that don't have internet, or we have families that can't fill out online applications. We've got to have paper applications as well. And while I do agree that there are some parts of the country that may be true, I think, and again, you do not have to agree with me, but I think in 2021, pretty much everybody has a phone. Okay. And if your online application can be completed on a phone, then you don't need to have a paper application, right? We have a lot of our schools that are using our grant and aid products. So our financial aid application, that entire financial aid application is online. So if they can fill out a financial aid application, they can fill out an application for enrollment. Again, the reason I tell you this is just because I think sometimes we coddle our parents a little bit, and we maybe give them the option of paper applications because we feel like they need it. And really and truly, if we just took that paper application option away, they wouldn't balk at it. Because if you are collecting paper applications, then you've just added something to your plate. Somehow those paper applications have to be put into your system. And if you've got an enrollment office of one, you're the one putting it into the system. I know many of you use fax application and enrollment. I know there's some other great products out there. I work for fax, so the screenshots are going to be fax application and enrollment. But again, I don't really care how you automate your applications. They need to be automated. And part of the online application process is that all that stuff that you have to collect on the application process can also be automated. So for example, for our product, for our fax application product, we have a way for parents to electronically upload any supporting documentation that you need. So last year's grades, standardized test scores, anything like that, they can upload during the application process. And our entire application process is mobile responsive. So like I said, if they don't have a computer with internet, that's totally fine. They've got their phone. I even had occasionally, this didn't happen too long, but I even had some parents who would come into my office and they would say, I need help filling out an application. And I would just show them how to pull it up on their phone. And they literally would fill it out on their phone, but in my office. And, I could kind of walk them through the process. But when they get to that electronic document submission, now all they have to do is literally take a picture of their kid's shot record or, last year's grades or anything like that. A lot of our schools, I know a lot of you require electronic teacher referrals. So the sending school needs to give a teacher referral for the applicant. Some of our schools require a pastor referral to make sure that the student is a parishioner or that kind of thing. All of that can be done electronically. And I point this out because this was like a game changer for me. I was an office of one, and before I started using our fax application product, I had my admissions folders, and I would always receive the grades from one person, and then the teacher referral from one person, and the pastor referral from one person. And like sometimes it made it to my mailbox, and sometimes it was across campus. And I felt like I was spending so much time like traipsing all over campus to try to grab all the pieces of this child's application to put it in the folder. And that's just not a great use of time, especially when there's one of you. And so when I started using fax application with all those electronic pieces, that was a game changer, because when that application came into me, it was totally complete. So again, that's not a sales pitch for online application. That's just a best practice to automate and make sure that your applications are online. And then you can do the same thing with enrollment or with registration. So pretty much all of our schools require, some type of re-registration or something like that. I mean, every year you've got to have updated medical information, updated shot record, updated, emergency contacts and all those types of things. Again, I used our fax enrollment product, but the reason I liked our fax enrollment product is because when parents logged in to complete their registration or enrollment, those terms are pretty interchangeable, because they were already in the student information system, everything was pre-populated. So, there's nothing worse than if you've had your kids at a school since they were in kindergarten, but every year I'm having to fill out my address and my phone number and my email, where I'm sitting here going, why am I giving you this again? You've got all this information. So again, just from a customer service perspective, you want to make things convenient for your parents, but also for you. I mean, you don't need to be hand entering anybody's information in 2021, and especially not if you have an enrollment office of one. Okay, let's talk about prospective parents. And I know that, excuse me, this sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but I say that it's best practice to diligently enter every inquiry that comes in. Either the parent enters it themselves from the website, from your inquiry form on the website, or if they're a walk-in or a phone call, you put it into your software. And like I said, that sounds a little counterintuitive because it sounds like it would take more time to spend the time of putting all those inquiries in. But in the long run, it actually is going to save you less time, because here's why. You have to, it's called lead nurturing, right? You have to really follow up with every single prospective student that inquires. And when it's just you, okay, it's not going to cut it for you to write their name down on a yellow legal pad and hope that you remember to follow up. Nobody has the capacity to do that. And I say that from experience because I thought I had the capacity to do that because I'm really high capacity. No, I had so many kids fall through the cracks before I made myself use some type of inquiry software, or CRM software is sometimes what it's called. And the other thing is, if you ever get a second enrollment staff person, which hopefully you will, then you can't rely on just your yellow legal pad, right? Because CRM software, inquiry software, allows you to share information so that this new person that comes in, this mythical second staff member, then they can see all of the correspondence that you've had with the prospective parent, and they can help you follow up. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. Again, I'm obviously partial to fax because I use it, but we have just recently done a big old overhaul of our inquiry area. And this is like, when I say this is a game changer, like I almost want to go back and work in a school for a little while just so I can use all these new tools. But this is a screenshot of just an example of kind of the way that you can use CRM software. So let's say that you give a sibling discount for your application fee and you're getting full in a certain grade level, right? Well, this is just kind of a what if. I can filter my list by siblings. Okay, so I'm looking at my sibling inquiries, and then I could also filter it by grade level. And I can maybe say, we're going to do a special sibling open house or shadow day or something like that. And so you can see that I can filter this a bunch of different ways, and I can see who have I invited to a tour in the past, who's come to a tour, who's declined the tour, and I can get my list personalized, right? So exactly who I need to reach out to, and then I can reach out to them all at once. So again, there's lots of different software that does stuff like this, but if you're not using some type of software, I don't even really care if you just use an Excel spreadsheet, although there's better things out there than Excel, but just something that's not a yellow legal pad, right? Because if you are still relying on paper to keep yourself organized, you're just going to have kids fall through the crack. And I'm passionate about this because there's nothing that makes me sadder than to think about a family falling through the cracks and not coming to your Catholic school just because you didn't have a system in place and you forgot about them. Again, this is just screenshots of our system, but there's different ways to do it. So we have built into our inquiry system task feature. So you can see that I've got my task list and I can see exactly who I need to reach out to or who I need to get the soccer coach to reach out to or whatever. So it's very personalized. And then we also have a checklist feature to just kind of keep me organized. So every kid can use the same checklist, and a lot of this stuff can be automated. So you can see that if I've got a place on my checklist that's like, email 2 days after the tour, I can have an automated email that goes out on that day. I mean, lots of software does this, okay? And it's not expensive out there. So even if you're not using fax application and enrollment, you want to use something. I'll give you a super simple way to do it is if you're using Outlook or Gmail, which most of our schools are, you can do these follow-ups inside of your Outlook or your Gmail. This is a screenshot from Outlook, but if you've never used the follow-up button, if you right-click on an email, so let's say you get someone who emails in or who fills out an inquiry form and says, I'm interested in your school, right? You can right-click on that email and use the follow-up flag and give yourself a due date, okay? And then that due date is going to prompt you to do something with that. So again, you don't have to use any kind of special software. You can just use your email software. I used to do the same thing in Outlook with tasks. So if I'm not using, something like our fax application and enrollment, you can just use tasks in Outlook. And like I would have a folder that said something like invite to open house or, follow up in a week. And then I would just drag those emails to that task and then show my task list every day. So again, there's tons of different ways that you can do it. I'm a huge fan of using text reminders, even for prospective parents. Number one, I am certainly not a millennial. I am definitely a Gen Xer, but I feel like I'm a Gen Xer with millennial tendencies. And so I don't really like to talk on the phone. I will always respond to your text or your email, but I really don't like to talk on the phone. So I would have loved, if I was a prospective parent, to get a text reminder of like an open house coming up or something like that. And again, there's a ton of different ways that you can do that. Within Fax, we have a product called Parent Alert, which is our text alert system. A lot of our schools use remind.com, which is free. Well, I mean, there's a paid version, but the free version is just fine. And basically what you can do is when someone inquires, you can add a question on your inquiry form that says, just like you do when we sign up for stuff, that says, would you like to receive text reminders? You do want to give them a question that asks whether they want to opt in or not. You don't want to just randomly start texting them. I bet you in 2021, 95% of your parents will say, yes, text me, right? Because I think there's a lot of people out there like me that would rather a text than a phone call. But think about this, like you could use text reminders to remind them of open house, to remind them of their entrance test coming up, to remind them to fill out the application. I mean, there's a ton of different ways that you can use it. And regarding communication, if you are not reaching out to your prospects via some type of email communication, there are plenty of software programs that will automate that for you. Okay. And so don't get overwhelmed with this. I have used all three of these. I've used MailChimp, I've used Emma, I've used Constant Contact. I like MailChimp the best, but that's just my preference. But basically what I did is I went in, so I exported all of my inquiries out of my application and enrollment into MailChimp. I just did it once a week and it was automated. And then I created a series of emails that went to those prospects, and they were just marketing emails. It was, thank you so much for your interest in our school. Did you know that we have a STEM program? Here's some stuff about STEM. Did you know that we, were a National Blue Ribbon school last year? I mean, whatever it is, but those are the types of things. I know that sounds overwhelming and you're probably thinking to yourself, thanks for the offer, Courtney, but I don't have time to create all those. And you're right, you don't, but I'm going to go back to the summer. I've taken away all your summer. But these are the kind of things that I did during the summer. I created all of those automated emails for my prospects. I also created all of my newsletter templates for my current parents. So, one of my responsibilities was sending out the school-wide newsletter every Sunday night. That was just fell under my umbrella. And so I created my newsletter template. And of course we used Fax, so you can do it in Fax or you can do it in whatever communication software you use. But all of those things were things that I did during the summer, because like I said, and this might just be me, but when school starts and my office was like kind of in the center of campus, basically, like it was not quiet. And so I just had people in and out of my office all the time, which I loved, but there would have been no way that during the school year, I would have been able to have the wherewithal and the quiet time to create these templates. This is another kind of revolutionary tip, but I'll just tell you again from experience, if possible, go ahead and create your 21-22 application and enrollment packets during the summer. I know that sounds crazy because, y'all might not start accepting applications for new kids until November. And then maybe you don't even start, enrollment packets until Catholic Schools Week in January. But the reason I like doing it during the summer is, again, the quiet time, but it gives you time to, and this is what I would recommend, to go through your whole packet and make sure that it's as succinct as possible. Are you asking information that you've been asking for years just because you've always done it? It's probably, it may be too much. Like, for example, with our Fax application and enrollment, one of the kind of default questions that we put in there is on the parent side is parents' employment, occupation, job category, and job address, and city, state, and zip. Okay. Now, do I think it's important for you to collect your parents' employment information? Of course. Do I think you need job category, address. Like, how many times have you used a parent's employment address, city, state, and zip? Like, I never use that, right? And so, but I'm sitting there asking for it every year just because we've always done that. Now, that was just my experience. Maybe you do need every parent's employment address because your development office needs it or something like that. So I'm not saying don't collect that, but just, the summer gives you some quiet time to look at those packets with a critical eye and just decide, like, do I really need to collect this information? It's also helpful to sit down. What I used to do is I would sit down with my principals during the summer and I would say, all right, here's my application and my enrollment packets. Is there anything I'm not asking that y'all wish we would ask? Or do you care about all this stuff? Can I make it a little bit shorter? Because again, there's nothing more irritating to a parent than to be filling out just a million question application that really could be, just a few screens. I took the summer to order any type of goodies or giveaways or any type of little, branded stuff that I gave away at open house or anything like that. Now, I recognize that none of our schools, mine included, have this big giant, marketing budget. Like, I mean, if you do, that's great. We did not. But this is the thing. You can buy anything on the internet. You can get your school brand on it and it's cheap. Okay. So I ordered, for example, we did koozies a lot because those are super cheap. And literally you can Google like inexpensive koozies and you're going to get a million different websites that you can use. And they're all great. I mean, they're all fine. I did one year, just little mints, like little, breath mints or whatever. And they just had our school in there. And no, I remember it was cute. It said, you were meant, like, get it, MINT, you were meant to be at my school. But again, those are just fun little things. They're not expensive. I think it's worth ordering them so that you have something to give away to prospective parents. And again, I would use the summer to do that. This is one of my favorite books. It has nothing to do with school, but Donna Cutting has this whole business called The Celebrity Experience. And both of these books are great. I would read The Celebrity Experience first and then the 501 Ways. But she gives so many great concrete ideas in there that you can do on the scale of your school. But her basic premise is you want every single person to feel like a celebrity, right? And so this is just like one, it's kind of a silly example, but my oldest daughter is a sophomore in college. So a couple years ago, we were doing a college tour with her. So we were visiting all the different colleges when she was a senior. And every college we went to, she was so tickled when she saw that she had a reserved parking place, right? And you can see what she did. She would take a picture with it. She would post it on Instagram. She just thought it was the greatest thing ever. Like, that is such an easy idea. It makes it special. It makes it memorable. And literally you can buy these little acrylic holder things from Amazon for super cheap and put them on your visitor parking and just make a little template that says, welcome, whatever prospective family's coming. Again, that's just one example. It was so easy to do, but it made such a high impact. And none of the other schools in our area were doing that, right? They had just general visitor parking or admissions office parking. But it was really cool when they came to our school and they had, a personalized plate. These are some other things that we did. Those little, the little pennants were really cheap. The t-shirts even were not expensive. We sent these little welcome packets out to our families when they enrolled and encouraged them to post them on social media. Again, just anything like that you can do to differentiate yourself from the other schools. Okay, so what else can we automate, right? So automating tours and tests and interviews. If you are the only one in your office, then you are probably booked up solid, especially at this time of the year, with private tours, open houses. If you do any kind of entrance screening or entrance test, your interviews. I mean, I know that like this was my time that I was totally booked up. You can use, there's tons of tools that can automate this. This screenshot is from something called Calendly, which I really liked. There's a free version, and then of course you can upgrade, but it integrates with your Outlook calendar or your Gmail calendar, and it gives people a really nice way to schedule their own tours. And then it automates all the reminders. There's another one called You Can Book Me that I've seen people use. Again, it's inexpensive. If you use fax application and enrollment, we have built in event management into our application and enrollment. So people can register for events directly on their form. And then the system is going to automatically remind them. You can cut off registration. So like one thing I used to do is for open house, it used to make me crazy when people would register for open house like the morning of or the night before, because again, because there was only one of me, when I did an open house, like I was the one that had to do all the name tags and make sure the tablecloth was there and order the cookies and get the punch and do everything. And I tried to do that ahead of time. And then someone would register for open house the morning of, and then they wouldn't have a name tag. And it's just, I don't know, it was just a mess. With our event management system, you can actually cut off RSVPs at a certain time. So like I would probably cut off RSVPs before a day before, right? Microsoft too, I will say this, I just discovered this. So if your school uses Microsoft, so if you're an Office 365 school, there's a new-ish thing, I think it's new because I've never noticed it before, but there's a newish thing called Microsoft Bookings, and it does this for you. So like for me, for my fax job, I've created a Microsoft Bookings page that connects to my calendar, and it gives everybody just a link. Like I can just send out my bookings link. I actually have it on my email signature. So it says schedule a time with me, and people can schedule it themselves. It sends me a notification. It goes straight to my Outlook calendar. It sends the person a notification. And there's all kinds of really cool things in there. Like you could, so for example, I have a 60-minute meeting and a 30-minute meeting. But what you could do is you could have an event that was, an hour private tour, a 30-minute sit down with the principal, schedule your entrance test, your interview. I mean, you could have different event types for each of the admissions events that you have to manage. And again, this is just another way to automate it. And this, I mean, I'm really telling you this for your own sanity, but for parents, right? For parents' convenience, this is what parents expect. All right, my next thing on the agenda was to use your parents and teachers. And I'm not actually going to spend too much time on this because like I can do a whole I actually do a whole webinar on how to really use your parents and teachers for parent ambassadors, and to educate your teachers on how important their role in strategic enrollment management is. The only thing I'll say about those two groups for parents, as much as you can utilize parents to help you, do it. Okay, so here's a great example. We had a parent ambassador group which helped me with tours, and they came and helped me with open house. So eventually my open house parent ambassadors were the ones who got the coffee ready and the punch and the cookies and organized everything. They kind of did that for me. But I used parents on open house tours. And I think for a long time, maybe this is just because I'm a bit of a control freak, but I think for a long time, I felt like, well, I'm the admissions director, I'm the enrollment director, I need to be the one doing every single tour. And while there's some truth to that, like there's other people that can do tours. And you know what I found is prospective parents wanted to hear from real live parents who had their kids at the school, right? This is like not rocket science. And so bringing along those parents to actually do the tours. I mean, of course I was there and I walked along with them, but it was really cool to see kind of the different perspectives. And again, this didn't happen overnight. A parent ambassador group does not just magically pop up overnight. I mean, it definitely requires organization from you. And, in my experience, it definitely was evolving. I mean, it started out very basic and then it became a little bit more formalized. But you can get to a point where your parent ambassadors and you can pair them up with prospective parents. So for example, a lot of times, I mean, certainly you can pair up ambassadors with prospects based on what their kids are interested in. So a soccer parent does a tour for a kid who's interested in soccer. A lot of times I would pair up ambassadors that came from a certain school, their kids were at this certain feeder school, and I would make sure to pair them with a prospect coming from that feeder school. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Another lifesaver for me with my parents is I used parents for social media ambassadors, and basically their role, they had one of two roles. They were rah-rah cheerleaders for the school on their social media. And so how that played out is they would agree to consistently share content that I posted on the school page to their social network. And that allowed me to reach a ton more people than I ever would have reached just on the school page. They also helped me out because they were members of like community groups online. So for example, here in Louisiana where I live, we've got a couple of different Facebook groups, Madisonville Mamas, Mandeville Mamas. That's, you know, there's dads in there too, but those are kind of the groups where people go on their Facebook group to get, you know, referrals and opinions and things like that. And my social media ambassadors were really helpful with sort of monitoring some conversations. And so, for example, if someone came in and said, I just moved to the area, does anybody know anything about, you know, so-and-so school? My social media ambassadors agreed to kind of monitor that and come into the conversation and volunteer for that person to maybe call them to talk about it. It was just really helpful because there's just no way that I could have monitored all of that with an enrollment office of one, right? Especially at this time of the year. I mean, there was just no way. So I highly recommend using your parents. And then for your teachers as well, you know, you never want to put more work on your teachers because teachers are doing like incredible work in the classroom. But at the same time, I hate saying this, but they are the key to retention. If you have a family that has a bad experience in a classroom, it's likely that they won't return the next year, which is not fair because, you know, it's not, I mean, the next year might have been totally different, but that's just the way it is. And so I spent a lot of time really like educating my teachers, talking to my teachers about retention, making sure that they knew the numbers of who's coming back and who's not coming back, just so that it would feel like a team effort and not just me doing it in the admissions office. All right, let me finish up here by giving you some real specific resources that I used and I loved. If you are in charge of marketing, so if you're in charge of social media, there's an app called Sked Social. There's a paid version. I don't think there's a free version anymore, but it's worth every penny because basically you can create your social media posts and then you can schedule them out using Sked Social. So you don't have to be doing it live. I was pretty disciplined about having like a set time that I created all my social media posts and scheduled them so that I didn't have to worry and scramble to try to find something to post each day. Again, I'm taking your summer away left and right, but this is something that I did during the summer is I created a totally separate Facebook account from my personal account, like a school only Facebook account. And all I did on that Facebook account was follow other schools. And the reason for that is I could steal their ideas, borrow their ideas. I don't know how you should say it to sound politically correct. We'll say borrow their ideas. But there are schools out there that are doing really cool things on social media, and especially if they're not in your area. So, you know, like we have a ton of schools that use facts. I follow all of them on my school only account, just so that you can kind of get your creative juices flowing and see what other schools are posting on social media, and then you can adapt it for yours. If you have ever used Time Hop, personally, it's kind of a fun little app, but basically what it does is it reminds you each day of what you posted on that day last year, the year before, you know, as far back as you've been doing it. And I use Time Hop to recycle content. So my Time Hop app would tell me, hey, you posted this in, you know, 2018 on this day. And so I would go, okay, I remember that. Now I can recycle it. I mean, obviously I would update the pictures and things like that. But again, anything to just help me to not have to start something from scratch. This is something that was like a game changer for me. So I scheduled on my calendar every week, Wednesday morning, 8 to 10, what I called marketing walks. I just named them that. And the key to this is when I went to work on Wednesday, I did not even turn on my computer. I put my stuff down, I got my phone, and I started walking. And there was no agenda. All I did was literally walk around campus. I would walk into classrooms. I would talk to kids in the hall. It was basically for two purposes. Number one, to just get content, to be able to take pictures and videos as the learning was happening. But what really happened is it allowed me to develop a really great relationship with my teachers. And so, you know, I would see what they were doing in the classroom and I would say, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. Can I take some pictures? Can I tell a prospective family to set up an appointment so they can come see you doing this incredible lab or something like that? And it really became more of a collaborative effort between the teachers and me when we started talking about retention, but you have to be disciplined about it. I cannot say enough good things about Canva. If you are not using Canva, you absolutely need to be using Canva. It will make you look like a graphic designer. It's free for nonprofits. There's a ton of templates in there. You can put in your brand guide. So you can put in your, colors and logo and all those things so that when you are creating your posts, they all look cohesive and consistent. And again, for an enrollment office of one, you just don't have the luxury of having to start everything from scratch. This is important to know. You don't need anything fancy. So I am working right now with one of our schools near me, and they are just now dipping their toes into the social media world. And the assistant principal is the one that's in charge of it, right? Because they don't have a full-time marketing director, and she dabbles in admissions as well. But she was really paranoid about this because she was like, I'm not a great picture taker. Like, where am I going to get content? I don't know how to do this. And I said, you've got to trust me. Take your phone, go walk around campus. And she took these pictures with her iPhone, right? No fancy camera. And she literally would walk up to a kid on the playground and say, hey, smile at me. Let me take a picture. She took the picture, and then in Canva, there's like a one button that will eliminate the background. So that's how it looks like it's cut out. And how precious are these kids, right? These pictures. So it is so easy for her now to take these pictures, and she can use them in any number of ways. She's doing a campaign, a social media campaign to kick off that their new STEM program. So she's going to use these pictures with some STEM stats. So again, if you get sort of paralyzed with like doing social media or trying to think of stuff, I promise you don't need anything fancy. Okay, so have a life. We'll finish up with this. This is my favorite one, actually. You got to have a life. I know that it's very difficult when it's an enrollment office of one. It's difficult for you to think like, oh, I need to go do my own professional development, but you've got to carve out some time to do it. You would never expect your teachers to do really great work in the classroom without professional development. And it's the same thing with you. These are some of my favorite books. We talked about the celebrity experience already. The Jab Jab Right Hook is about effective social media use. The Brains on Fire book is about the importance of storytelling. And you as an enrollment director, that's what you are. I mean, you are a storyteller. When you go on every tour with a prospective family, you're telling the story of your school. But again, I'm sounding like I was so disciplined the whole time. It took me a while to get to this, but I would schedule on my calendar time for professional development reading. Not a ton of time, 20 minutes a week, something like that. But I was able to knock out a lot of really great books on customer service, on enrollment management. These books in particular are not specific to schools. They're more just like kind of general, but you'd be surprised at how many of these principles you can take to our K-12 schools. If you don't have a lot of money, which we didn't, there are a ton of free resources. If you are not familiar with Rick Newberry of Enrollment Catalyst, he's fantastic. We talked about Schneider B, Inspired School Marketing. Those are all free newsletters that you can sign up for. And Schneider B sends once a week. Rick Newberry sends once a week. Inspired School Marketing sends daily during the week. And again, there's no cost to it, but the resources that they give are incredible. Obviously, anything that NCEA puts out is amazing. You are all NCEA members. You need to take advantage of any webinars that they put out. They're all incredibly high quality. I almost always had a webinar playing in the background. Now, I was still kind of multitasking, because you got to get your work done, but I still do that today. And of course, all the webinars that any of these organizations put out, you can typically register for them. You don't have to be on them live, and then they'll send you the recording. So whenever it's convenient for you, but you have to be disciplined enough to make yourself watch them. Again, if you've ever had the opportunity to go to a Partners in Mission event, cannot say enough good things about it. I hope we're back in Boston this summer. But anything that Partners in Mission puts out is incredible. CAPE, which is the Council on Private Education, they also have just a free newsletter. And again, I guess I'm trying to give you some free options because it's difficult to go to your principal or your board and be like, hey, I need, some money for professional development. Although I do think it's important that you do have a PD budget. All right, and then to finish up, this is my last slide. Turn off at 5 p.m. Okay, probably the most difficult advice I'm going to give you. I learned this the hard way. When I was working, when I was doing both, I guess, two jobs, I was an assistant principal and I was also marketing and enrollment. I found myself spending my time at school doing my first job. I would come home, kiss my kids, start dinner, and then get right back on the computer, because I just thought, gosh, we've got prospective parents emailing, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do this. And if I had to go back, to my younger Courtney and give her some advice, even prospective parents don't expect you to be emailing them at 10 o'clock at night. Okay. I said the work we're doing is incredibly important, but we're not curing cancer. And I had to really remember that, because I remember when my own kids were little, I was working a ton after hours, basically. And again, if I had to go back, maybe I'm just older and wiser now, but if I had to go back, I would have set myself this is when I turn off. I have never met a prospective parent that's mad at you because you were spending time with your family in the evening instead of answering their questions on email. So again, that's just my 2 cents. Like I said, I think I'm older and wiser now about what's important, but I do love my job. And I know when I was an admissions director, I felt so passionately about those prospects that I wanted every single family to come to my school, which is awesome. And I hope you all have the same enthusiasm for your school, but at the same time, you've got to have a work-life balance. All right, so that is it. I'm gonna finish up now. This is my contact information. I would love to interact with any of you that want to reach out. I clearly love talking about enrollment and admissions. It is my favorite thing. I love talking about facts. It's my second favorite thing. But if you ever want to bounce ideas off of me, or if you even want me to look at maybe your application and just give you some suggestions or anything like that, I would be absolutely happy to. And again, thank you so much for joining. And I'm so thankful for NCEA for giving us all this opportunity. So I will talk to you soon.